self-care is, swinging on a hammock, making a smoothie that like nourishes you, walking on the land barefoot, going for a swim. Like none of these things need to cost money. Now, I love to luxuriate as well, but it doesn't need to. This is about you resetting to center and becoming present.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Power in the Pause podcast. Don't forget to hit subscribe so that you don't miss a single episode that comes out every single week. And if you love this episode or you love this podcast or you just love me, do me a favor and leave a rating and or a review so that more people can find this podcast and help to guide them through their pauses in life. So thank you guys for joining me today and in today's episode, because today is a very special episode. It's not only my first guest episode of my new podcast, but it's so incredibly just potent as to who is here with me today. And I am joined by my dear soul sister, my friend, and truly my mentor, Corrina Steward. Hello, Corrina. How are you?
Hello, Wendy. I'm wonderful. I'm very, very excited to be on your new podcast and to get to be the first guest expert on your podcast. Is really special, and I know we're going to have a powerful conversation today.
I know, me too. I'm already getting the goosebumps all about it, even when we were chatting before I hit the record button. And today, you guys, Corrina and I are going to talk about the power in the pause as it relates to those moments where you know that it's time to reset your business, to reset your connection to money, to reset your frequency. Really, it's all about how is it that you can increase your abundance through the pause. So before we dive in, I'm going to share a little bit with you all about Corrina. So Corrina Steward is the CEO and founder of Soul Wealth Coaching, which is a 7-figure business that she created while working from home as a mom. Corrina is a former United Nations consultant. She's a published academic and a graduate of Yale University and Coach U Inc. In the midst of her career, she woke up spiritually and received the new wealth consciousness that is essential for all spiritually conscious entrepreneurs. She's an angelic Reiki master, an energy realignment specialist, and a wealth activator. As a soul wealth coach and CEO of her company, her desire is to provide you with the proven business strategies and spiritually vital steps to activate your wealth, know how to scale your business through your core offer, and always be able to create wealth inside your business to fuel your 6- and 7-figure vision. And Corrina has done that for me. And I have been not only a friend of hers for many years, but finally, committed to working with her and elevating my business. And I'm so grateful for you to be here because you are such an incredible example of what is possible. And I know that, you've not only witnessed what I have been experiencing over the last couple of years, and even more specifically, how it is that this podcast even came to be. But I'm curious for you to share with our audience a little bit more deeply around your journey in how you've navigated the power in the pause as it relates to resetting your business and your money and your frequency.
Wow. Well, what a question, Wendy. Thank you for that kickoff question. As I was hearing it really took me to a deeper message around the pause, which at first confronts us. I mean, the pause at first is a disruption. And quite frankly, we may not enjoy the fact that it has come. So I want to speak into that because for me, moments when the pause has come, it is not something that I have invited in. It's not something that I have wanted to happen in my life, certainly not in my money, not in my business, because, as an entrepreneur, and any of you that are listening who are entrepreneurs or thinking about becoming entrepreneurs, when you have a business, like you are the source of your abundance, like 100%. And while we could say that about everyone, when it's your business, like if you stop, the money stops. And if people are counting on you, like in my case, I am the sole, earner in my family, and you start to feel like a little edgy and can get really freaked out. So I just want to bring that in. Like anytime I've gone through cycles of pause, my first experience of it is basically WTF, like what is going on? Yeah. What am I missing? Right? Because I come from a very soulful place. I'm going to be asking like my soul, my higher self, like, what am I missing? But at first, the experience for me, and I've had this in the last 6 months in my own business where things came to a halt. And what I mean by that was like the energy wasn't there anymore for things that I was doing, messages that I was putting out in the world, a way that I was doing business, the way I was showing up as a soul-led leader. It wasn't that I could put my finger on anything and go, oh, well, that's off, or it was just like the plug was pulled. Mm-hmm. And I panicked because I didn't have an answer. Like, well, if the plug is, what am I supposed to be doing? So here's why I'm sharing that, because there is power in the pause, and you will miss it if you stay in the panic. You will miss it if you don't understand why it's happening and that it is actually for you. And it has a huge potential for you. And what I can say is, in the last 6 months for me, it looked like first, like a major interruption and a disruption and an irritation. So those are some stages of it. But then what I did, and I have done many cycles because I've been in this particular business for 7 years. So it's certainly not the first go around of that, of being shown like, hey, it's time to stop doing, it's time to pull back, go inside, see what's, up. It's time to create something new. But it's to then start paying attention. And this is something, Wendy, I've shared with you, mm-hmm. which is red light, green light. And this can be a really easy tool, is to first go like, all right, well, what is supported, which are the green lights, and what's not supported, those are the red lights. Some of that may be just for you on a personal level where it's like, you know what, like, I really haven't been paying attention. I haven't been being connected to my soul. I haven't actually connected to my energy. And as much as I do this work and teach this work to be soul-led and soul-driven and, grow abundance from soul, I have moments where it's like, you're in life, you're in the doing, and you can kind of get in the middle of that. So as the plug was pulled out, a lot of red lights came in, and I got to sit with it. I really got to sit with it and go, well, what is it? But I have a lot of tools that I use for that, whether that's meditation, energy work. There's, one person I'll go to that can support me in that. And I have a mentor, I use all of that to help. But here's where the power of it is. It's a chrysalis moment. It's a moment where you find yourself all of a sudden, like you are in a chrysalis, you didn't even know it. And then you start looking around and going, why am I here? And for me, what I discovered is the good news was that I was stepping away from things that were no longer aligned for me. I mean, to be honest, and we are going to talk about wealth consciousness here, and that's still a thread in what I am about. But there was an evolution that wanted to come in. And the messaging and the work that I was doing in the wealth consciousness space, it was pretty complete. And I was like, no, there's more of you to be birthed. So I got excited because honestly, I was like, this is actually why I'm here. Like, I get to be all of me. And for some, the reason that you resist the pause is because there's fear in being all of you. There's fear in fully coming out of the closet and going, you know what? This is who I really am. Yep. And especially, when you're in the spiritual space, there can be a lot of fear about coming out to really shine your light and be the light in the world. We live in a planet where that is not always supported. And those inner skills and the inner movement is not supported. But I'll tell you, being on the other side of giving it the space, which look like things like, you know what, if it's not aligned with where I'm going and I don't feel the green light, it doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen. That means I'm pausing it. I'm pausing the program. I'm pulling it out. I'm no longer going to do it. Right. Or I have a timeline. Like there's still some shift in my business space that I have a timeline on it. Like I'm like, oh, that's come the new year, that's going to shift out. It won't be anymore. But it starts with that, like red light, green light, what's supported and what's not. But the sooner you get into that space, my experience has been the quicker you get the answers. And those are the answers you're looking for. But you've got to take that pause and not bypass what wants to teach you. Your future is ready to teach you. Your higher consciousness is ready to teach you. But if you're not available for it, which you become available in the pause, then you're just going to keep looping and cycling on things that actually aren't working anymore.
Right. Well, and I think you hit on something so powerful and a lot of people can relate to is, you know, this fear that comes in the pause, especially for those of us, and I'm speaking for myself, and I know a lot of listeners who are doers, right? We like to be in control. We feel like we are in momentum when we are doing. And as you know, for the last, 2 years, I have really been focusing on getting out of my doer and being Wendy and really leaning into that. And I think that what we resist in the pause is those moments where it is an opportunity for us to lean into the being. And we resist that because it's not only uncomfortable, but it's so unknown because it's like a full 360 from how it is that we've operated for how many decades of our life. And, you know, one of the things that I think that you have been such a tremendous mentor for me in understanding is how it is that those feminine qualities appear in the pauses, right? That the power truly was being in my feminine. And again, you know, as you know, and I've talked about in other either podcasts or just on social media, is that my journey in the pause started last November when we went to Egypt. And you witnessed me resisting for almost a year, you know, close to 8 months of like what being Wendy was supposed to look, or not supposed to, but what being Wendy looks like. And so can you talk a little bit about how, you know, I'm sure that there's somebody listening out there who's like, I don't know how to be, like, I don't know any other way. Like, I want to change. I want to be in my feminine. I want to stand in my power in those moments. Can you talk a little bit about what embodying feminine energy and consciousness looks like and feels like?
Yeah. Yeah, this is really good because first I want to say, like, if you are feeling the call or like the pulse or the movement to shift into being, you're right on track. Because as a planetary consciousness, we're shifting into a feminine consciousness. And I'll talk about what that actually means. You know, we've been in the doing energy. We've been in more of the masculine, like producing, generating energy, meaning like your money comes from when you do, your money comes from like getting a lot done. And that has been the system, that's been the structure of business, of our economy, of work. And so there's a lot of ingrained programming that we have around that. And so it is scary to be like shifting gears because it doesn't feel natural in some way, even though it's the most natural thing to do is to be you, but it's not what you know. But the feminine, and I imagine there's a lot of women hearing this, but even for men, right? The feminine are things like following your intuition, following the movement of energy, and just having a sense of where things are flowing. You know, if you're a mom, you get this sense with your own children, right? You've known them since they were babies, and from that moment, and you watch them blossom and grow, you can already essentially see who they're going to be, right? And who they are, and their defaults and their strengths and their gifts and their personality. Like it's like this just inherent beingness. And when they're out of alignment of that, it's going to be really easy to see that. Maybe they're trying to be something that they're not. And it's really easy, right? From an outside looking in, we can see that. So I share that because it's no different for you, for any one of us. Being and the feminine nature of that is to follow what I feel is like a pulse, because it's this pulse of life that is literally flowing through everything. And it's to put yourself in that river of life, and go with the river rather than trying to swim upstream it. And when we're in the doing, like that's what's happening, is like, and that's exhausting. It's like you're just keep trying to go up the, against the current rather than flowing downstream. We are hardwired in with what the flow is. That's your intuition. This is what we could call like just a sense and knowing. It isn't always as tangible as masculine energy. That's like, well, what does it look like, right? That comes. This isn't about not having a masculine structure or systems and form, but it's coming from the being first, coming from intuition first, coming from what is actually supported in the energy of who you are. And when you come from there, then the masculine is very simple. Those are, oh, it's clear. I know what I'm going to create. It really is the shortcut. So the irony of it is we think in the doing that we're getting somewhere, when in fact we're not. But if you slow down, right, there's a saying of slow down to speed up. If you slow down and go inside, connect with your energy, connect to the messages that are inside of you, connect to your heart. That's another aspect of the feminine, which is love, right? The feminine heart, this love and compassion, and pour that into yourself, and you give that space, then the solutions are clear. They're easy. They're simple. And now all of a sudden you're already there where you wanted to be, but you actually didn't have to expend a lot of energy trying to get there.
Right.
So the more that you're really following, I mean, this is the language of soul. This is, our soul speaks to us from a place of intuition, from signs, from messages in dreams. And for the longest time, Wendy, I will tell you, I mean, this is very wired in me and has been for so long. Like I have prophetic dreams I have for decades. But I always, like, because I was so ingrained with that masculine, you read my bios, like I went to Ivy League schools, I was top of the class, like this was what I learned. I didn't give it value for so long. Like I was curious and I would maybe read books about it, but I didn't allow it to be the central way in which I exist. And it wasn't until I really built that muscle and said, you know what, I pour in to who I am first. And who I am is this greater being. I am the soul. And I allow my soul to show me the way. And the more I poured into that, it's like a muscle, and it gets stronger and it gets stronger until it became central to how I exist. And yes, there are moments when I'm like, oh, I just want to do something. It's no. Wait for it. Because it'll be that much more powerful if you wait for it to crystallize and tune in and tap in. But it's to really give what some might call those sort of softer qualities, of feeling and sensing and knowing and intuition and allowing things to move. But it's also where healing happens.
Right.
And sometimes we're put on pause, we could say, because there's something to heal, healing a broken heart, healing like even from things you just went through recently, you might be, like some of us have needed to heal from all the doing. Because
literally
it's exhausting, and we just need to rest.
Yep.
Self-care, right? That's a part of the feminine consciousness.
Yeah, and that word resonates deeply, as you know, because I was so in this doing, and it wasn't creating the results that the old version of me was able to create when I was in that energy, right? It served us until it no longer served us, because we were coming up against that new threshold, that new ceiling. As I, say, it's all about shattering ceilings and paving new paths. And the only way to lean in and to get to the other side of that is really to allow yourself to sit in the being of the pause. And you've said so many things I want to ask you about, but there's this, I think that part of all of our fears, right? And this was one of mine, is, well, what if people really see all of me, right? I've been known in the divorce space for 6 years. I have been, I've had this other podcast. I have been coaching divorcees. I am all about teaching women how to recover and heal from their divorce. And all of a sudden, I'm feeling this pull in a new direction, which is also going to expose, as you said, like the more spiritual side of me, where I was afraid and I was concerned. What are people going to say? What are people going to think? And ultimately, when you get to that place of when you really realize that there's ego versus intuition. And when your intuition is that softer voice, just continuing to just kind of like guide you versus your ego, which is like, no, don't do this. Stop. What are you doing? Security. It's that louder voice. And I think that so many, I know of so many women who are so afraid to really kind of almost like expose themselves in this higher level of consciousness, afraid of letting go of those that they've brought on their journey for so long. And to me, what I'm hearing you say is that it's really about, as you are up leveling your frequency, right? It's hard to come back down to where you were when people can kind of sniff out that it's kind of fake. Like it's just not as genuine as when you're up here at that higher level of frequency. So can you talk a little bit into how it is that when we allow ourselves to step into that new frequency, and essentially it forces us to really reset everything else in our life to attract that next level of abundance and opportunity?
Yeah. I mean, this is why so many don't reset their frequency or follow that pulse of energy that is from the soul and really coming from a future possibility, because the fear of what it's going to mean about relationships, about businesses you might already have, about a career that you're in, about family, like there's just all the but what does it mean about my whole reality? And it's true, what you're saying is it does mean a 360 transformation of your reality.
Right.
It's something I always say, like when people are afraid. In fact, I have someone who was messaging on a DM with Instagram and was like, thinking about working with me. And I was like, I'm not sure if I want to take the step. I'm trying to figure out if my soul is telling me not to do this or if it's my blockages. And I said, your soul would never stop you from having what you desire. That's not how this works. Same with the pulse of energy that's coming in that's saying, move in this direction, not where you've been. It's all for you. It's all for you. And I can promise you that what's on the other side, you're going to enjoy more than what your current reality is. There's not going to be anything that you're going to be disappointed in. That said, you are from the level of consciousness that you're still in at the old frequency. To your ego, it will look like a death. To your ego, it will look like a loss, like a sacrifice. But that's the fire that you need to walk through in order to receive the fruits that are on the other side. It's all an illusion, but that's why this is like being like the spiritual warrior, right? Because we need to face our dragons, right? To get to the gold that's on the other side of the dragon. That's the setup. It's to realize that it's an illusion anyway, right? Fear, false evidence appearing real. And when you're willing to consider that is true, then you'll walk through it. And I won't lie to you, absolutely, at another level of frequency, at that new threshold, there will be things that will drop away. And whether that's existing clients, existing things you've poured all sorts of heart and soul and energy into, that just, they're complete, right? For me, a lot has happened. When this started, it was like, you're going to go buy this house. So we bought a house. It was like, we needed to be in a different location. We got to walk through that. That was a wonderful thing. And yet it was intense, like buying a house in 60 days, like, okay, doing it. Right. And, honestly, like we're in a house that still has so much that needs to be done. And we're barely unpacked. And some people would not even have done that because it's like, oh, but how are we going to make it everything that I want? Whereas you're in your comfort where you live, right? And so you don't move.
Right.
But this is how it works. And the willingness to take the risk, not only, I can promise you that it's worth it, but to be aware that it's just simply law. It's law. If you exist at a higher threshold and at a new frequency, all that can exist with you in there is anything that is in resonance with the new frequency that you are. And that is very neutral in how it works. But there's a cost to staying at the old frequency.
Yep.
And a big part of it is not only the continual kind of like pitfalls that you're going to keep hitting into, but there really does become a cost even to the physical body and your physical health. I mean, I'm sure so many that are listening to this are in that overdrive, that are in the like, you know, adrenals being taxed out and like, you know, feeling that, because if you're stuck in the doing, it strains on your body and it strains on your health. And this is why sometimes you're just going to be thrown into a crisis. Maybe it's a health crisis because your body is saying you need to reset, that it's not working for you. And that is actually your body's way of protecting you.
Right.
And, you know, often it can come through that way.
Yeah. And I think, you know, what you just said is super relatable. And it even comes through in unexpected life transformations, right? That that could be any number of things. Ultimately, you know, with me, I hear the signs, but it's like, sometimes they have to come, you know, a bunch of different times, a bunch of different ways. And you know, my last and final one really came from me just, I mean, I was so burned out. I mean, for me, the transition was burnout, and I hadn't experienced burnout for years. I mean, as an entrepreneur, I mean, I loved what I was doing. I loved my calling. I loved my mission. I loved what, you know, what I had created until I stopped. And it really put me into a state of just complete and utter procrastination and burnout. And you know, leaning into what you had said before is really that self-care element. And I think that a lot of people also think that self-care has to look a certain way, or it has to cost a certain amount of money, or it has to be a certain amount of, you know, time that we give ourselves. And ultimately, you know, self-care is something as simple as just pausing.
Yeah. I mean, Wendy, my favorite pause is literally like giving myself my morning. Like it's my favorite time of day. And I live in this gorgeous place, looking at the mountains, looking at the ocean, like palm trees and green parrots. And I just want to sit on my deck, like, and like take it in and not need to do anything. See, on the old mindset, I'd be like, oh my gosh, I need to have an offer. I need to have an email written. I need to, and that would be the first thing. Instead, no, I need to breathe. I need to breathe. I need to get centered in me.
Yeah.
And when I do that, like, then I'll know what is the aligned movement that wants to become visible in the world. Like that's self-care. Like literally just, or sometimes I sit on the land here because I get so much, it's so charged up, it's so energetically potent. And I'm like, oh no. I mean, I did that 2 weeks ago and I took a whole day and all I did was just be in my home. Like whether that was up on my deck and looking at it or sitting in our little banana grove and like receiving information from the land. And to anyone who was, if they were watching me on the outside, it would look like I was doing nothing. And someone who's really stuck in the field of doing would think it was lazy, right? Like,
right.
What is she doing? Like, you know, especially if you looked around me, I have a lot I could be doing in my home right now. But I'm like, no, I'm not about a to-do list. This is not how I operate. It's let me connect in. So yeah, self-care is, you know, swinging on a hammock, making a smoothie that like nourishes you, walking, you know, walking on the land barefoot, going for a swim. Like none of these things need to cost money. Now, I love to luxuriate as well, but it doesn't need to. This is about you resetting to center and becoming present.
I love
that is the best self-care gift you could give yourself.
Yeah, I love that. And you know, and it brings up, you know, I think one of the reasons why, and especially now that maybe a lot of us are having trouble being in the present, is we're living in a world that is, you know, quite honestly, you know, a world that none of us thought we would be alive to witness or to see, right? That there's so much uncertainty and change being, you the word I'm hearing, it's like, there's so much heavy breathing around change and uncertainty right now that is, perpetuating, the fears and the unrest that a lot of us are feeling these days. And I think that, there's also guilt that comes up of like, well, but this is happening somewhere else. And look at me and look what I'm doing in my life. And I think that what a lot of, one of the things I had to come to terms with and kind of wrap my mind around even very recently is it gets to look different for all of us, how it is that we are breathing through the uncertainty and the change. And rather than resisting, right, or being hesitant and keeping distance from, your true path and really what your highest self sees as being in your best interest, instead of leaning into that, it's like, well, no, I get to be the light, right? We get to embody what it is that the world gets to see. And, some people may say, well, that's selfish or the judgment, right, can go on for, we could have a whole other podcast about the judgment that comes with that. And it's important for those of us that are intended to be, right, these light workers, these high vibrational frequency workers, how can people just kind of, or rather, what advice would you give somebody who's kind of in this place of like, I know that this is where I'm supposed to be, right? Like, I know that I was born to be a butterfly, right? Coming back into the chrysalis example, which, resonates with me, the whole metamorphosis, thing, process. And so it's like, if somebody really knows right now, like, I'm supposed to be a butterfly, and I'm a caterpillar, and it's selfish if I go into my chrysalis because of all this other stuff that's happening. Like, it's selfish for me to become that butterfly. Like, what advice would you give somebody about, really leaning into and embracing the change that is on the other side, right? You may not be able to see it, but that there's something there.
Yeah. Yeah. This is really good because I used to feel really guilty about taking like what we could call self-care time. I'm a mom of two. My husband does most of the domestic stuff. All of cooks our meals, does the grocery shopping, does the laundry, like those things. And as a woman, I would occasionally feel guilt about that, even though like I'm running an epic business and I'm making the money and like, this is this contorted thing, right? Like, well, hello, like I'm massively contributing. And yet, there's that programming, right? That tells me as a mom, like I should be, or even as a wife, right? Like I should have a certain role. So I would feel this like almost need to ask permission, right? I'd be like, hey, hon, so I'm going to go just like, is it cool if I just go lay down on the bed? I'm going to do some energy work. I'm going to meditate a little bit. And, he never had those hangups, but I would feel like I needed to ask the permission.
Right.
And so I feel like your question gets to this. Like, it's almost like, do I have the permission and the privilege to take a pause?
Right.
When all sorts of things are happening, maybe in my personal life, my kids need me, my husband needs me, my community needs me, the world needs me, right? And then we start thinking that the way that you're needed looks a certain way. And that's what we make up about that.
Right.
Well, what I've discovered about that is we're wrong. We're wrong often about that. Because, it comes down to some simple things. First, the age old, saying you got to put the oxygen mask on yourself first, right? That is true. If you are not breathing, if you are not centered, if you are not present, if you are not okay, no amount of doing is actually moving anything in your reality because you are not filled up. You are not okay. So that has always got to be step one. But I would even say from the standpoint of like the bigger kind of picture of the planet and your soul purpose and all of us that are connected as really a soul group and a consciousness that are here to be the light. We're a team. And we talked about this on, another call we did because it's a big aha for people to realize that, if you are being tapped to go in, if you are being tapped to pause right now, that is actually making room for someone else then to step up and be visibly in the light. Because see, we're connected. And it's important as a team of light to remember that, hey, you know what? You got to go sit back, go do some self-care, take the pause, and there's going to be someone else that's going to step in. You may not even know who that is, and it's okay. But it's so important that you do that. Otherwise, you're not allowing space for someone else to step in and be visible and contribute in a more visible way. Now, you taking care of you is contributing, not only because you're now filling your own cup again, which is essential, but you see, I've done some of my best work in meditations, like my best work. You're literally moving the consciousness of the planet. And that's a whole area we could speak into, right? But like, we are energy. And so if your energy is not expanding and you're in contraction and you're in stress and overwhelm, well, that's what you're putting in the world.
Right.
Like, you're no good to anyone and you're not contributing to this higher soul path that is why you're here. So go inside, shift your energy, which is to shift your frequency. And now, wow, things start moving for you, first of all. But now you are a positive impact on the planet.
This reminds me of something you said earlier this morning. Corrina was teaching a class this morning and it was amazing. And you said something that really resonated with me. And I feel like it fits into this point. You said two things, actually, because the word I keep hearing is it's really around trust and surrender, right? Trusting in the pause, trusting in the power in the pause. And the second level of that, of what you said today, which resonates deeply because, this particular first word that I'm going to say is actually the name of my private mentorship program, which is, you said paradigm shifts don't make sense until you make the leap. And
yes.
I mean, I still get goosebumps, right?
Yeah.
Like beyond chills. And, I think that that's what so many of us have a problem with. We think that the leap either has to look a certain way, it has to be huge, it has to be like full of energy. And sometimes taking that leap means just stopping.
Yeah.
And trusting that what's on the other side. So I'd love for you to talk into that as we, bring our episode to a close. So
it's so good. Here's the thing. We are in a paradigm shift. And what I mean by that is, what we've been talking about here on this episode, because we're shifting into the feminine consciousness and the feminine ways of being. All of us are, no matter if you're a man or a woman. And that is to allow room and space for our higher consciousness to exist here. And that is the paradigm shift, that we're coming from higher consciousness, which is to come from our light and to come from our soul and to be embodied in our soul here.
Right.
But that's not going to make any sense to the part of you that hasn't made that shift yet. You literally can't read the language of that. You won't understand it. That's the caterpillar inside the chrysalis that has no clue that it's becoming a butterfly, doesn't know what wings are, doesn't know what flying is like, doesn't know what the outside world, flying to a flower is. So all it knows is inside the chrysalis and being the caterpillar that's going through some mushy, messy phase, which is getting to a pivot point, right? So if you realize that can take away the hesitation to lean in to trusting that it's going to work out for you. That if you do lean into the pause, on the other side of that is everything that your heart desires. That's the promise on the other side. But it takes the courage to stop needing to have certainty or needing to know what it is on the other side. Because the more you obsess and attach to that, you actually push away your own shift. You push it away and you say, stop. So yeah, I mean, I think it helps just to realize that it's like impossible to know what's on the other side. But the way to get there faster and accelerate it is lean in. Lean in and follow that energy because it is showing you how. It's teaching you.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I couldn't agree more. And oh my God, there's so much more I want to ask you. And we could talk about, Corrina, this was amazing. This was such a powerful conversation. And I want to make sure that everybody knows where they can also follow you and where they can find you.
Yeah. So, my best advice is to find me on Instagram because I'm available for DMs there. You can message me. You can tell me you heard this episode and what lit you up about it. I'd love to hear from you. So I have two Instagram accounts. My main one is at the New Code Global. So you'll find me there. And then also I have a new Instagram account that I started just a couple of months ago called The Frequency Experiment, and it's at The Frequency Experiment. So you can find me there as well. Those are really the best ways to find me, and we can connect. You'll see my content, you'll see things I put out there, and come say hello.
And you also have your own podcast.
Oh, yes, I do. It's called Activate Your Wealth. Yes. I've got hundreds of episodes. So listen to those. Those are amazing. I know people binge on them, just like people binge on your podcast, Wendy.
Yeah.
If you want to go deeper in, this work, wealth consciousness, resetting, higher consciousness business, go check that out. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of episodes to listen to.
Yeah. And they're amazing. I still go back and listen to so many of them because there's so much amazingness in them. Plus you feel elevated every time you finish listening to one of your episodes, which I do hope my listeners feel the same way about my podcast episodes as well. But Corrina, thank you so much for just being who you are in this world. I'm so grateful that our paths crossed when they did. And just, the work that you do is unparalleled and just so incredibly potent. So thank you for being my guest today.
Thank you, Wendy. This was awesome. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And it was a real honor to be here. Thank you for inviting me to be a part of your brand new podcast.
Yeah, you're welcome. And you guys, Corrina also has a free gift for you guys, which you can check out in the show notes. I don't know if you want to say anything about it or not, but it's the 5 essential keys to unlocking your wealth.
Yes. This is my foundational process to shifting your wealth frequency. So it is 5 days of video activations and teachings on shifting your wealth frequency.
Yeah, it's so good, you guys. Grab it, go in the show notes, click on it. Just do it. That's all I have to say. It's incredibly powerful. And everybody, thank you guys so much for tuning into today's episodes. As you know, with every single one of my episodes, my goal is to really demonstrate and show you how it is that you too can tap into the power within when you choose to pause. So thank you guys for listening to this week's episode. Don't forget to also follow me across social media if you aren't already. My new Instagram is Wendy Page Sterling, and that's me on Facebook as well as on Instagram. And I also encourage you guys to please rate and review this podcast so that I get more listeners and can help impact and change more lives. So thanks for tuning in, sending you all so much love, light, and joy as always. Mwah. Bye, everybody.